This is the second video on solving SQUEBFTSR with problems with I. So let's look at three problems. And for these three problems, what I would like you to do is to solve each one of these problems. Write them all down. And I would like you to solve each for all real solutions or for all complex solutions. And after you write them down, I'd like you to pause the video and then solve the problems, and when you're finished, start the video again and check your answers. So pause the video now. Alright, hopefully now that you've solved these three problems, and let's look at the answers. So the answer to the first one is the real solutions are, there are no real solutions, and the complex solutions are plus or minus 5i root 3. For the second one, again, no real solutions, and the imaginary solutions, complex solutions, are plus or minus 2i. For the third one, there is a real solution. In fact, there's two of them, plus or minus 2 root 10. And since those are real solutions, then they're also complex solutions as well. So if you've got all these problems right, then what you can do is stop this video and go on to the next one. If you haven't, if you've made a mistake on one of these, what I'm going to do now is work through each one of these, and then hopefully you can find a mistake that you've made. So let's look at the first one. 5x squared plus 425 is equal to 50. Well, the only thing that, the reason this is an easy problem is there's an x squared term but no x term, so we're simply going to isolate the x squared term. So I'm going to subtract 425 and subtract 425. So I get 5x squared is equal to, that's going to be minus 375. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 5, or you can multiply by 1/5 if you wish. Divide by 5 and divide by 5, and you get x squared is equal to, and that's going to be, let's look at what 375 divided by 5 is. 375 divided by 5 is going to be 75. Now it's a negative 375, so it's a minus 75, so you're going to get x squared is equal to the square root of minus 75. So if you think about this, there's two steps to these problems. The first step is to isolate the x squared term, and the second step is to take the square root of both sides. Now when you take the square root of both sides, you want to add your plus or minus to both sides. Now the very first part of the problem was solve for all real solutions. If they ask you for all real solutions, at this point when you have x squared is equal to a negative number, you know there's no real solution. So A is no real solution. Or you can just abbreviate it NRS. Now, let's go on to the next step. X squared is equal to plus or minus square root of minus 75. To find the complex solutions, what you're going to do is you're going to simplify the square root of negative 75. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split the negative 75 into minus 1 and 75. So you have plus or minus square root of minus 1 square root of 75. Square root of minus 1 is I. So you have plus or minus I squared of 75. And now we're going to simplify the square root of 75. Find two numbers that multiply to 75, one of which is a perfect square. So that's going to be 25 and 3. That's going to be a 5. So your final answer is plus or minus I times 5 times square root of 3. Typically we write that 5i squared of 3. And that's B. Your complex solutions are plus or minus 5i squared of 3. Sometimes you'll see it written 5 root 3i. In some sense this makes more sense, but this is more typical. That's number 1. Let's look at number 2. Number 2, you have 8x squared plus 10 is equal to 6x squared plus 2. Now this is also a SQUEBFTSR problem. What you're going to do is you have an x squared term but no x term, so you simply isolate the x squared terms. Now remember, there's two steps really. 1, isolate x squared. 2, take the square root. And that's it. That's the only two steps. So then you get 2x squared plus 10 is equal to 2. I want to isolate the x squared, so I'm going to put the 10 on the other side. So I'll subtract 10 and subtract 10. You have 2x squared is equal to minus 8. I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2, and I have x squared is minus 4. At this point, I can answer the first part of the problem. Remember, there was 2 steps to each problem. One was solve for all real solutions, and then solve for all complex solutions. At this point where you have x squared is minus 4, there is no real number that you can square and get a negative, so your answer would be no real solution, or NRS. But we can continue with part B. Part B, you have x squared is minus 4. We're going to take the square root of both sides. We get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of minus 4. We're going to simplify this by taking out a minus 1, so you have minus 1 and 4. And then that's an I, and that's a 2. So you have plus or minus I times 2, or plus or minus 2i. And that's going to be your answer to B. So your answer to A, no real solution. Your answer to B is plus or minus 2i. So there's a little complexity here, right? There are solutions, and there are 2 types of solutions. There are solutions which are real, and there are solutions which are imaginary. So you'll either be asked for the real solutions only, which in that case you only get the real solutions, or you'll ask for complex solutions. If you're asked for the complex solutions, you are going to solve for any real or imaginary solutions, because complex numbers include real numbers and imaginary numbers. So let's look at the third problem. 4x squared plus 10 is equal to 3x squared plus 50. This is also a SQUEBFTSR problem because you have an x squared term but no x term. So I'm going to isolate the x squared term. You have minus 3x squared minus 3x squared. You have x squared plus 10 is equal to 50. Now I'm going to subtract 10, and you have x squared is equal to 40. Now at this point, we're not going to use I. We don't need to use I because we're going to have real solutions here. So you're going to take the square root of both sides. You get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 40. And you're simply going to simplify that. That's going to be 4 and 10. So that's plus or minus the square root of 4, square root of 10. Or x is equal to plus or minus 2 root 10. And these are both real and complex solutions. So the answer to A, remember the original question was solve for all real solutions and then solve for all complex solutions. The real solutions will be plus or minus 2 root 10, so there's 2 real solutions. And there's also 2 complex solutions, 2 plus or minus 2 root 10. And that's how you solve complex numbers. SQUEBFTSR using I.